Hi, welcome back to our last keynote of the day. I'm so happy that you guys have stuck with us through Desticon. I'm so pleased to introduce Laurie Rowe, who I've known for many, many years. She's Laurie Rowe Communications, and her session is going to be amazing, talking about travel media, earned media specifically, which I know a lot of people are interested in. So, without further ado, Laurie, hello. Can you give
Well,
us a little?
hello. Excuse me, I got a little frog in my throat. Thank you for having me, Jen. It's been fun to sit in on some of these sessions. Especially one of the things I noticed is that it's kind of validating is several of us, like Kevin with WeWa Films and our friends in Lake Charles, Timothy and Catherine, and then uh, Adam with Relic, we're saying a lot of the same things, maybe in a little bit of a different way. So I like that. We're talking about earned, owned, and paid media, as well as how all of that fits into community shared values. So let's go to the next slide. So in this presentation, I kind of want to just, first of all, I'm going to give you some background in storytelling, but the storytelling is really about me and how I really just fell in love with earned media. Some pretty cool things happened early in my career. And I feel like what's interesting is now it is happening again. So it's kind of a full circle moment. We're going to talk a little bit about paid, owned, and earned media and the differences in the three. And then the long game. I'm sure y'all are dying to know what the long game is. And there are a few reasons why we call travel media PR or PR in general the long game, which we're going to touch on. Part of this, the reason is because of the timing for your pitching and distribution, and when publications put out their editorial calendars, and when you need photos, and when they're going to go to publish it. So there's a lot that goes into the timing of pitching and making sure that you're in sync with publications and their publishing dates. But my very favorite thing about earned media being a long game is that journalists, freelance journalists especially, will continue to write stories once they've visited a destination or connected with you. They will write stories for years and years to come. So you have that initial investment, and then it's the gift that keeps on giving. I'm going to have a bit about how to work with freelance journalists and journalists in general in this presentation. And the plan, I want you to walk away with something. So if you've never had and this is all really specifically to travel media. So if you have not had a travel media outreach public relations program, I hope this sparks the interest in you having one, and you'll kind of have a roadmap of how to do that. And if you already have that, I'm hoping that you'll get some tips and some ideas from the presentation that you can implement in the program that you already do. I do want to bring up, there are two words we use a lot, and one of them is roundups. And I didn't realize that everybody doesn't know that. We'll have some new clients and they'll say, oh, excuse me, what is a roundup? So roundup is an article that's going to have many different destinations or many different attractions listed in it. Sometimes they also come in the form of a listicle, which everybody's seen those now. It's the top 10 this, the best of. Those are fun. Those are a great way to get some large national coverage. We can see a lot of it for Christmas towns, best spring break, those type of things. And then lastly, we're going to talk about press trips and individual media visits and editorial coverage. One thing I want to say that really I was thinking about this, that applies to everything in a travel media outreach program, public relations program, is it's curated. And I'm going to tell you how to do that, but you want them to have a curated experience. You want them to get basically curated media pitches. So you're able to direct the messaging, but you're not paying them to write something. So we'll go into a little bit of that and how you can do that. So this is just a little bit of background in public relations, communications, and earned media. if you'll look here, this is from PRSA, the Public Relations Society of America. You can see how many disciplines and functions there are within the umbrella of PR, public relations. I started my company in 2008, 2006. Anyway, my background is I'm from Atlanta, Georgia originally, but I went to school in Mobile, and I lived in Gulf Shores, Alabama in my 20s, and that was in the 80s, which was a very exciting time to be there. It was really just beginning to develop. And so when I went to work there, I worked for a hotel. First, I started out in front desk, then went to work for hotels. And after that, I moved back to Georgia, and I worked as the assistant director for the Dahlonega, Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Many of you are familiar with Dahlonega. I was going to marketing college there. From there, I went to the Marietta, Georgia Visitors Bureau, and then to the State Tourism Office, the Georgia State Tourism Office, as a director of domestic sales. The thing that the common thread through all of those jobs is that I did sales, but I also worked with the media. Not as much writing, but it's more media relations. When we had inquiries, when they needed to go on a trip, I curated and did all of that. So there came a time when I was working at the state that, little personal information, my husband got the job as my boss. And so we had to make some decisions then. So I went out and started my own company. I wasn't sure at that moment, because it happened quickly, what to name my company or exactly even what I was going to be doing. But I knew just from the bottom of my heart that I wanted to work with travel media. I think it's the best value for destinations, especially destinations without a large budget. So all that to say, I named the company Laurie Rowe Communications. And over the years, it has worked well, but over the past few years, especially, I would say, I found myself telling people what we don't do a little bit more than what we do. So in that, my firm is a little different. Everybody that works within Laurie Rowe & Company, almost everyone has been a destination marketer. And we've really come to the point where we're really only focusing on earned media. We don't do crisis communications. We don't do local PR. So it's been a very exciting time to say, this is what we do. We do it really well. We believe in it so much. And all of that to say that there are just a lot of different things that come under public relations. In this presentation, we're going to focus on travel media and earned media. So we're kind of going to get into why earned media, what's so great about earned media. And earned media, really the number one reason is that it's an objective third-party opinion. And it is someone else telling your story on their platform. I think Adam did a great job of talking about that this morning. Earned media can be digital magazines, it can be blogs, it can be print magazines and newspapers. It generally has has more longevity and a wider reach than paid advertising. And again, I'll go back to saying journalists often write multiple articles and blog posts for years and years. So you've earned that media, and it keeps turning every year. It's very cost effective. You have an initial investment of your program and what you put into your staff to create the program. And if you host journalists, there's going to be some cost there. But overall, it doesn't have to be a very expensive program to implement. Excuse me, this is something that again, I know that Adam touched on. There is paid media, which in my very simplistic description, it's really more about advertising. And owned media is media that you own. It could be emails, it could be blogs and social media. So you are directing the message, but you own that. And then earned media, well, let me take a step back too. A lot of folks talk about influencers and work with influencers. They most definitely have a place in tourism marketing for sure, but it would fall under owned or paid media, as you are, doing a contract with them, you're directing what they say and they get paid. So that's a little bit of a difference between earned media and owned media and paid media. This is my favorite slide. I love this. We work with Alpine Helen, White County, so we usually just call it Helen, Georgia, and I've hosted journalists in their destination for years and years. However, 2019, 2020, and 2021, they did not host. They put a pause on it, and they did not host any journalists. So during COVID, I was just thinking, I need to go look at our reports and see what's happening. Are we getting coverage? And the great news is we were getting them quite a bit of coverage. And I'll go into that a little bit later, but journalists were still working. They still needed stories. They just weren't traveling. So I took a look at the first year and then the subsequent years. So for that whole 3 years, there were 199 articles written by journalists that had already visited Alpine Helen, White County. So they were able to just check in, get updated information, and just keep writing. So I think that, to me, is just the perfect example of the long game and of the ROI that you can get from investing in a travel media outreach program, especially with freelance journalists. So now we're going to talk some about working with journalists. I'll have to say that in all my years, I think the number one thing that you need to do is be prepared. I always tell people that if you have your press room, your media room set up on your website, if you have treated this program as you do others, which means you have a business and you have everything that within easy access for journalists, then they'll do the work for you, but you've got to do your work up front. So preparedness, timeliness, and quality photos are key. Journalists are almost on an immediate deadline. I know almost everybody in the industry has had journalists request photos, especially, but maybe some information at the very last minute. And I mean, like, they need it that day. And it can be aggravating, but part of the reason they do that is because they travel a lot. And so they work in the evenings, or many freelance journalists have other jobs, so they work in the evenings. So it's not their fault. It's just the nature of the business that they're going to have last minute requests. So if you can make that easily accessible, or make yourself easily accessible to the journalists for those requests, then you'll be a trusted resource for them, and they will come back to you again and again. We talk about things like when a journalist reaches out to you and asks for some specific information. It could be about a restaurant. It could be about an oyster trail. It could be, about whatever they are writing about. Send them exactly what they're looking for. Don't just send them your whole website or, links to the places. They really need you to help drill down and get the exact information that they're looking for. I always say, if you really want to make this work, give them your cell phone number. It doesn't mean that you have to work on the weekends, although sometimes it's okay if you can at least get those messages. But provide your cell number and be ready that you're going to get some requests and calls, or at least texts, sometimes after hours. And I think we all know this, but share the published stories. Once they publish a story, share it on your socials. That really, it helps you boost the numbers up. It definitely helps them. I think that one of the most positive things I've seen in the past 5 years has been when we have articles published about a destination and they start sharing it on their social and it gets shared locally, that you see a lot of pride from the community because somebody else is saying how wonderful they are. I saw that a lot in Helen because they get on a lot of the list for the best Christmas towns. And I overheard someone saying one time, we're on all these lists, even Southern Living. And it made me so happy because it's really making them proud of their destination. So talking about working with freelance journalists, this is an example of a great relationship with the journalist. Some of you guys may know Caroline Eubanks. She is a freelance journalist. She lives in Georgia. we started working with Caroline right out of college. I think it was when she was out of college, maybe 2016. And she had her blog, Caroline in the City, which is focused on millennial travel. And that was something we really needed. We did not have many journalists that could speak to that audience. So she graduated, she had her blog, and we've worked with her continuously since then. And now on the slide, you can see the logos on this slide are just some of the publications that she was published in this year. BBC, Travel and Leisure, Delish. I mean, just it's all over the place. But she, on her website, has a recap every year of her, how she got to where she did. This year, she said she pitched, I think it was 350 stories. So that freelancer is working really hard on your behalf to get stories. When they come to your destination, they're usually going to have multiple interests. Like if you have them come to your destination to maybe do a culinary themed trip, keep in mind that she's going to see other things that intrigue her for story ideas. And if you can accommodate her to take a few minutes to really delve into that, you're helping her get you even more stories. Sorry, y'all, if you can't tell, my screen didn't share, so I'm having some help here with my PowerPoint. I want to go through. So this is Caroline Eubanks, and Leslie Peterson. Many of you know, most destinations in the South know Leslie Peterson of 365 Traveler. She had 365 Atlanta Traveler, and now it's 365 Traveler. I have this in here, not because they're bragging on us, which is lovely, but it's really they both use the press room almost daily, they and other journalists. So to have your press room valuable, it does not have to be on our site at all. But if you're working with travel media, you need to have a great press room on your website. But this is just them saying how often they go to the website and pull information, pull pictures, and how valuable that is for them. And then there are a couple of other testimonials from journalists that do the same thing. So now we're going to talk about the press rooms a little bit. I know most destinations, and I keep talking about destinations, but all this is applicable to attractions and lodging. So you can take these same concepts and apply them to that. Press rooms and media rooms are so important. Again, it works for you while you are not in the office. So you want to make sure that if you're reaching out to travel media, you have what they need on your website. And by that, I mean, it's wonderful to have local or industry announcements on your press room, on your website. But that also means that travel journalists are going to have to wade through a lot of news to get to maybe the story ideas or what they need. So kind of think of that a little bit differently, and that you might want to put some more resources on your media room, on your website, that speak directly to travel media. And you can't really see it here, but if you'll go to travelmediapressroom.com, there are about 30 destination press rooms on there. And it's kind of formulaic. Everybody needs to have some basics. You need to have an overview of your community or attraction. You need to, that's something that travel media loves, is annual events, but they have to be current. Then we always have some interesting tidbits and facts, which are fun for journalists when they're doing something. Maybe it's a roundup of quirky things, in the South. And then best assets that you have is photography. So you want to have high resolution, captioned and credited photos, which means you identify what the photo is of, where it is, and then the credit is who owns the rights to that picture. Generally, in destination marketing organizations, it is the CVB or the DMO, but you want to make sure that you have the rights for that. But again, just go check those press rooms out, because anybody can do that. So this is where we're coming to the plan. When you start a new year, and before the new year actually starts, you generally have done a lot of research. You've decided what your marketing plan is, and what you're going to do to be able to implement that, what tools you need, what markets you're going to look at, what results you want from that. You need to do the same thing with your travel media public relations plan. Here are just a few of the things that are good to know. Like, what are the goals for the program? Do you want to grow awareness? Maybe your destination or attraction isn't really well known. Excuse me. Is it a new hotel or new product that you want to talk about? Do you want to increase visitation, which is almost always yes? Then you need to determine your messaging. How are you going to tell people about that? That's kind of curating the information that they get. And then who do you want to, earned media and travel media is the same thing as, it's not the same thing as advertising, but you need to know what demographics you're looking for, what your demographics you're looking to reach, what geographic markets that you want to reach. And then you match media outlets to those goals. So that's a lot of research that goes in the beginning of the program. So I think we've got some more on the next slide. So once you decide what the goals of the program are going to be, what markets that you are trying to penetrate or go after, you need to identify how are you going to reach that goal. Like, you look out through the year, you look at timing. So this one, say maybe we're going to send out 8 press releases, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that is quite a lot. 3 media event alerts, 2 news. Just figure out who you're reaching out to and when you're reaching out to them. And we have a little bit more about that in the presentation. Yeah, one of the things, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Something that is very important is timing. We're going to see that on the next slide, I think, but this is another one of my favorite slides that I like. When you're writing press releases, your press release has to be interesting, like immediately, because you have literally only seconds to grab the attention of an editor or a freelance writer. They get hundreds and hundreds of pitches. So think of it like a tweet. You just need to get that, grab their attention. Don't use flowery prose. There's some beautiful words, and there are some that there's nothing wrong with it, but it's something that they'll see a lot. If you Googled nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, you'd probably get a million hits. Quaint is something to possibly not use all the time. In the heart of, nestled in. Live, work, play is used quite a lot. So just kind of be aware. You want your destination or attraction to stand out. You want it. There's something about every destination and every attraction or lodging that is different from the other. So you really want to pull that out and put that right in the beginning of the press release. This was one of the fun ones that was done this year. This is in Smith County, Virginia, which is very mountainous. It could have read like this. It could have said, fun for the whole family, camping, hiking, and more in Smith County, nestled in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains of Southwest Virginia. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a pretty sentence. But this writer, went through and pulled out what the families would actually be doing and seeing. And it came out to be a really fun lead. Is woolly mammoths, salamander hikes, and yurts, hike-in views, drive-in movies, and flyover zip lines add to family fun in Smith County, Virginia. So take the time again to make sure that you're pulling out what is unique about your product. And in this, you can go back and look at this. It's just kind of the basics about what you need to have in a press release. You need to have, if it's an event, you need to have dates, cost, websites, contact information. Can't say enough about proofing and editing. I know everybody needs to share what they've written with someone else to be able to proof it. It doesn't matter how many times you go through it. It always helps to have someone else to edit or proof your writing. I don't know if all of you guys know about Grammarly.com. It's a great tool to at least be able to go in and make sure you're not missing something that's pretty obvious. And the length of a press release should not be very long. 800, maybe 1,000 words, and 1,000 is kind of on the long side. So try to keep things kind of short. And go to the next one. I can't tell you how many times that I have seen journalists really try to get some photos from a destination. They weren't able to get it, and so the destination lost the chance to be in the article. So photos are very, very important. This in this presentation, we talk about how we get earned media. Part of it is through what I call the public relations side, where we write press releases, we pitch them, we distribute them and post them on their media room pages. And then another way is going to be media inquiries and then press trips. So this was fun. This was a press release that was sent out. And then a couple of months later, out of the blue, there was a digital article in Southern Living. So what this editor did, they took the information and then they tweaked it, made it their own, and posted it. So the timeline was great because it's digital. When we're working with, say, Southern Living, Garden and Gun, some of the print magazines, that can be almost a 2-year lead to get your articles published. But the good news is they have a digital side that can only take a couple of months. This was fun. This also came from a press release early in, gosh, this has probably been maybe not 10 years ago, but a press release was sent out about thoroughbred country, South Carolina. And in it, there was a story about what is included, the Wisteria Inn. The Wisteria Inn is a beautiful, small B&B that's kind of out in the country. And her neighbors, the local people, were telling her, nobody's going to come out here. Nobody's going to come out here and stay here. So this press release went out. The same thing, a journalist took the information from the press release, made it her own. This woman's a regular columnist in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So the Wisteria Inn was included in this article, and her phone rang off the hook, and she is still in business today. When I talked earlier about roundups and listicles, this is a great example of that. A journalist reached out and wanted to know about the cutest seaside towns in the South. And I can't remember how many were in there, probably 30. But so these are two of the ones that we work with. But it's not in depth, but it's still great to be included in these roundups. Many times, Country Living or Southern Living, they're also picked up by Yahoo or MSN. So it just kind of continues to be published throughout the nation. This is just a little bit more of a sample of roundups and listicles. You can go ahead and go to the next one. Another component, of course, that is going with your public relations program, travel media outreach, is press trips and media visits. That the difference between sending out press releases and getting some of these national roundups is they're wonderful for awareness. They're huge numbers, but where you're going to get the really experiential, in-depth editorial articles is when journalists visit your destination and are able to immerse themselves in the culture and within the area that they're looking to cover. This was fun. This was a trip to the Mississippi Delta. And, we all take pictures of our food now, but this was a great example of the journalists really trying to get a great shot. And then Ashley from Vicksburg was standing behind them with their hands on their backs to make sure they didn't fall. But this is how it translates. This is them taking the photos. And then on the right-hand side is just a snapshot of a video that the woman, Debbie Lander, on the right took that day. So I have a good bit to say about press trips. I know that in general, people call them FAMs now, familiarization trips, but I really prefer, if we can, to say media visit, press trip, because in my mind, familiarization tours are, they're fast. You know, you're going to go to a destination and you're just kind of peek into the destination, see snippets of what they'll be able to sell, what they'll be able to do. Whereas a press trip and a media visit is going to be much more experiential. You don't want it to be, you know, an hour here, an hour there. It needs to be experiential. They need to immerse themselves in whatever. If it's outdoor, then they need to do the outdoor adventure. They need to go hiking. They need to go whitewater rafting. If it's cultural, then they'll want to spend some time in the museums. But again, remember, often when you have a journalist in your destination, they're coming because something interested them, but while they're there, they may also get another story idea and want to get some more information. And that is because they're going to be able to have more time in the destination. Something else that's important is when you have journalists in your destination is make sure they have access to Wi-Fi. You know, we all have many destinations are rural, and it's okay to be without it some. You just have to make them aware of when they're going to be without it. But oftentimes they're still working on stories and they have deadlines while they're on a trip with you. This is fun. This is a perfect example of a press trip and then the results that came from that. And this first one on the left is a beautiful photo, and that is from Ole Miss. So this is from William Faulkner's home. They had a cultural event there. So that in the middle, as it was pouring down rain, these journalists went on a NASCAR ride, and they also flew in a Huey helicopter. And then the bottom right-hand side was a great example of a journalist that visited a destination. And while she was there, saw something that she was very interested in, and they were able to kind of pivot and let her experience it. And that was a ghost hunt. She was in Corinth, Mississippi, and if anybody is familiar with ghost hunting, the Tennessee Wraith Chasers were there. So she was able to experience some time with them. And these are a sample of some of the articles that were published from each of those trips. Oxford on the left, and the Henry County story has NASCAR and the Huey helicopter, and of course Corinth has the ghost hunt. This is a great example of inviting the journalist to return to your destination. When we started working with this destination and gave them a list of journalists that we thought were a great match for them, they said, well, Blake Guthrie has already been here. And he had, but it was several years ago. And I think it was on either a state press trip or a different type of trip where he was only in the county for a very, very short period of time. So he came back, spent 3 days immersed in Gulf County, and he, within 6 months, was able to get a full-page feature, as you see it, on Gulf County in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And it was in print, but it's also digital coverage. So you have to kind of be open-minded about that as well. Again, here's just a great example of a beautiful, more in-depth, experiential article in a magazine after a press trip. Again, just another, this was a direct result of a press trip in the Mississippi Delta. Just a few tips from a journalist. This is Deb Thompson, author and blogger. Again, it's just what we've talked about earlier, is make sure you have your assets available, your photos and video. I did not say video earlier, but you want to have the tools for them to be able to tell the story of your destination. And then, especially for digital and especially for our blogger friends, share the story that makes all the difference for them and for you. We, as a rule, don't write. When I say we, I mean the team at Laurie Rowe and Company. We don't write for SEO, but we work with a lot of journalists that do. So you're able to get a lot of digital coverage that way and help really boost your numbers. There are so many resources to help you garner earned media coverage, and these are just a few. We touched on media queries and direct media queries. Sometimes the media will just come straight to you, to your destination, and tell them that they will tell you they're interested in a story and what they need. But there are also resources out there. HARO, HARO, is called Help a Reporter Out. Everybody should sign up for that. It's kind of a crowdsourcing for journalists. You'll get, I think, twice a day you can get updates, and you are able to curate the information. Like for travel, you want to get inquiries from travel writers. So you can do that a couple of times a day. They will come across with your desk with inquiries of all kinds of different stories, and you can decide whether that is relevant to you or not, but you can answer that way. It's a fantastic source. Trav Media has a national, actually I think they have some international journals here, media marketplace. And then Hype Status, good for vetting, for looking at numbers. Muckrack.com is a great resource to be able to see journalists' profiles and to see their work where they've been published. So we all want to show that there's an ROI on your investment for time. Most of the time, almost always, journalists that you've worked with will share their articles when published. They almost always do. So you can share that with your stakeholders. After a journalist has visited, it's okay to check in with them to see if they have anything published or to see if they need anything to help them get things published. So it's fine to check in with them. Of course, you don't want to badger them ever. But it's nice to touch in and see if they need any assets, any photos, or any more information. You can set Google alert that journalist for your destination. That's kind of elementary, but it's still one of the best ways to be able to find media coverage out there. There are media intelligence programs. The most common is probably Cision, CISION, and Meltwater. Those are resources you can search for journalists throughout the nation and internationally. You can search by name, but you can also search by beat. You can see the stats of the publication. And they also have, they have bloggers, and some of them have social media monitoring in there as well. It's not inexpensive, but if you're going to invest in a program, it's well worth looking into. Sorry, y'all. So how do we get there? How do you really begin to work with freelance journalists and getting earned media? And it's do the work. You have to do the work in advance. You want to make sure that it's a strategic program. Do your research, look for, there are several different organizations like the Society of American Travel Writers and others where you can join that and be a member, where you can go to marketplaces and meet journalists. There are, you can actually email me if you want a list of those. I didn't have enough room to put all of them on here, but you can definitely do that. Okay. That concludes the presentation for now. Do y'all have any questions for me?
That was great, Laurie. Thank you so much. And thank you for having patience with me and my PowerPoint pushing skills.
Well, thank you for doing that for me. And I'm really happy to answer questions, or if somebody has any questions, or they're thinking about doing this, please just email me. I would love to talk to you about it.
How do people get in touch with you?
Laurie Rowe, LaurieRowe at laurieroweco.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure that Laurie's information is out there for everybody too. And if you've got any questions, we'll sit here for a couple more minutes and see if you have anything. But Laurie, what we've noticed too is a lot of people are getting this content by streaming. So we can even have questions come to your session way after it's over, and I'll let you know if we do.
Well, good. I don't think I told the story, but how I first fell in love with earned media was when I was in Gulf Shores, and I was in my 20s, and I didn't know a lot, so my best friend at the Chamber of Commerce called me and said the state tourism office has a press trip going throughout the state, and we need to have them spend the night somewhere, and we need to feed them. Would you do that? And so this was in the fall, and in the 80s, there was not really much business in Gulf Shores in the fall. So I was like, sure, we'll be glad to do that. I had a little budget to do it. So we hosted these journalists. And then that was in the fall. And then in the spring, I was in Birmingham on sales calls. And I called back to the hotel, and the front desk people said, Laurie, where did you place an ad? And I said, I didn't. We don't have any ads running. One of the journalists that had visited on that trip, and this was in Cincinnati, I believe it was in Ohio, which is a major market for Gulf Shores. They published like a 2-page spread on Alabama in the Sunday travel section, because that's when travel sections used to come out. But our hotel had a huge photo, and our 800 number was on it, and we almost sold the hotel out for a week where we would have had no business. So I immediately, that was my first experience with earned media, and I was just all about it ever since.
Awesome. We do have a question from Laura. How about research as a source for earned media?
I'm not sure of the question exactly, Laura.
The answer. I know there's a little lag on our stream in the chat.
Do you mean an article published about research?
I'm thinking she means like information or research on a destination. Like, does that ever interest anybody in terms of, well, I guess in economic growth, things like that?
Yes. It's just it's more like a niche market when it's not, for general travel. So there are many outlets that do write about things like this, especially on lots of blogs and digital publications.
Awesome. Great. Wonderful. Well, what would be one last good piece of advice you would give somebody if they're looking to clean up their 2023 journalist and press game? Oh, wait.
I would
too. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, again, you be very strategic. You don't just wait for them to come to you. Make sure that you have a plan and that you have the resources to back up that plan.
I think that the resources, I think that's probably what everybody's thinking, listening to your sessions. Like, there's so many cool things, and they're like, I'm only one person, or I'm only a couple of people. So I think that's great.
I know. But I would say that that's the point, is once you get those resources and that page up, it works for you, and you don't have to keep, it's working for you all the time.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Laurie, so much. This was so helpful, and we're excited to see everybody have access to all of this via streaming, and we'll give you all Laurie's contact information, and I just really appreciate it all.
Well, I certainly appreciate being part of it, and I went a little fast through this as I didn't have my PowerPoint, but please, anybody, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll
Thanks,
see you
Jen.
guys in the hour. Bye-bye.
Bye.